Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude Beyond Mystic, and welcome to this Saturday night episode of the Wacky Woo. With me tonight, of course, is Mr. Jay Weidner. He is the writer and producer of the new documentary, A Clockwork Shining. You can find his work, of course, on Prime Video and also here on jayweidner.com, and finally on his YouTube channel at Reality Check. Jay, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hey, it's great to be back.
Excited to have you on, Jay. I have to in French, we would say chapeau, monsieur. I tilt my hat to you. The documentary, A Clockwork Shining, really blew my mind. I had no idea going into it how absolutely crazy and deep the rabbit holes were going to go. And I have to say, wow, congratulations, sir. And I'm so excited to share that with the audience and members tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. We are currently triple casting on YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble. If you guys are having issues with one of the platforms, please come and join us over on the other two as best you can. So this evening, guys, we have quite a bit to go through here on the documentary. I'm going to be asking Jay quite a few questions of the behind-the-scenes recording, perhaps new meanings of all of this, where we go with this. And if you want to follow along with us, I've created a page with you because there's a lot of information to go through. If you go to beyondmystic.net/Kubrick, there you'll see my show notes for tonight's episode. And you'll also get the links here to where you can rent Jay's documentary here on Amazon Prime and also on Apple TV. So Jay, let's get started. I think the best thing to do is to play the trailer to begin with. So let me change slide decks here for the audience members to hear the sound. I'll bring this back to you guys here. And hold on. This one here. There you go. And share. All right.
Hallucinogenic drugs, hypnosis, electric shocks to the brain.
Stop it, please, I beg you!
Some of the methods used in secret CIA mind control experiments.
There are many theories as to what The Shining is really about, from the faking of the moon landing to Native American genocide and the Holocaust.
Now, if he did fake the Apollo moon landing, then he probably has really deep connections into the intelligence world. Why are there these gigantic continuity errors in this movie?
The occulted meaning has to be comprehensible. It's just hidden, usually in a very systematic way, so that it could be understood by someone coming along later on who knows what the real meaning is supposed to be.
We believe that there's something even more sinister lurking beneath the surface of this masterful film.
So Lookout Mountain Hotel looked a lot like the Overlook Hotel.
You realize that there's no such thing as coincidences like that.
As Lookout Mountain Studios, ran by the Air Force.
That told the story of nuclear weapons testing by the United States.
Of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, the Air Force was known to be the most excited, the most turned on by MKUltra and its prospects.
Reportedly, there were more films made at Lookout Mountain than at all the other film studios in Hollywood.
We really don't know what these famous film directors were being recruited for, what project or whatever. Was it the moon landing?
The CIA's MKUltra programs were admitted to the public in 1975, 5 years before the release of The Shining.
These experiments were done without the informed consent of the patients.
Look at some UFO cases and the things that are reported tells me that MKUltra is likely being applied.
In my MKUltra mind control experience, I was taken to various military, NASA, and DARPA installations for sophisticated mind control programming.
Walt Disney, Marilyn Monroe, James Stewart, Cary Grant, Ronald Reagan. Nobody really knows what they were doing up there.
As well as high-ranking military and Department of Defense personnel.
What people don't realize is that many of the people that worked with Kubrick also worked with Kennedy. This is actually the smoking gun proving that Kubrick was working with the government.
These were all CIA-sponsored experiments.
I said, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to bash your brains.
And putting little symbolic, cryptic clues and Easter eggs pertaining to the fact that they're still doing it.
These clues include a hidden swastika in the background of the gold room.
what was the setup, what it was being told, and realize that it was a lie all along.
But right there in the narrative, in the dialogue, they're telling you that this was a very real program coming out of those nice folks at the CIA.
Here's Johnny.
I love the spooky laugh at the end there. And of course, here's Johnny famous scene. Jay, thank you so much. What a great trailer that is. Guys, thank you again for joining us tonight. Jay, I have to start with this. You and I, a couple of years ago, did a series on the Kubrick decodes on Beyond Mystic. You are, of course, one of the in my view, the original source materials for decoding a lot of Kubrick's work. You've done a career of it. Of course, people can watch your Odyssey 1 and 2, Kubrick's Odyssey 1 and 2 on Prime. And now this, your third one here, the Clockwork Shining. Before we get too far into that, you've explained when we did our Decode series on Beyond Mystic that you were a big fan of Kubrick as a young man, and that influenced you greatly into becoming a producer and a lover of cinematography. But I heard something in some of your latest interviews that I had not heard before here just in the last couple of weeks, and that was a channeling event of yours in 1999. Can you start by sharing that with the audience members and see how that ties in here to your love affair with Kubrick's work?
What happened in 1999? I didn't hear it.
Your channeling event after
yeah.
the death of Kubrick.
Yeah, so I'd been in France for 6 weeks doing research for my first book, which came out also in 1999. And I didn't know that Kubrick died. I'd gotten to the hotel in Paris after a huge, long road trip, and it was late at night. And I turned on the TV, and Full Metal Jacket, I think, was on. And I went, well, okay. And I watched it. And then the next night, I got back to my hotel late again, and I turned on 2001 was on. I was like, what's going on? Right. And of course, I didn't know that he died. And so I got home and I found out he died, and I was like really just shocked, really shocked. And I went, so it was a Saturday after I got back, and it was a heavy snow. I was living up at 9,000 feet, and I woke up and I had my breakfast, and I was just thinking about Stanley, couldn't stop thinking about him. And my wife gets up and she goes, you look kind of odd and funny. What's going on? And then I just overwhelming, like I got really hot, and I don't even remember doing this. She was writing down the notes as fast as she could after she realized that something really weird was going on. And I began telling her about how 2001 was a work of alchemy and transformation, and the whole moon landings, and it went on for about 2 hours. And I came out of it finally, and she was like, oh my God. And look at this, look at your notes here. I started reading them, going, well, that's really weird. I've never had an experience like that before. And I haven't told this second part of this story, which is even weirder. So but that afternoon, I lived in a small town up in the mountains. I decided to go to the only video store in town to rent 2001 because I wanted to see it, because I couldn't understand where I was coming up with all this stuff. And I walked into the store, and it was on the screen playing in the video rental store. And there's like a 17-year-old kid watching it. And I walked up and said, you kidding me? You're playing 2001: A Space Odyssey? He goes, yeah, man, I just can't figure out what this movie's about. And I was like, whoa. And so my immediate thought was that Kubrick's, Ba spirit, or his Ku spirit, depending on which Egyptian body you believe in, was roaming the earth trying to find someone who actually understood alchemy and filmmaking, so they could relate it before he split back to wherever he's going to. I was picked, I think, and certainly my wife thinks I was picked because she said it wasn't me. She said it was somebody else coming through me. And that's my conclusion. I think I channeled Kubrick, and I got all my knowledge in that 1 2 hour thing. And I've been kind of riding on it ever since. So it's kind of funny.
That's a
And
wonderful story. I have to ask you, had you had before in your lifetimes any inklings of channeling anybody else, or ever since that event?
no, but I will tell you this. My dad died at 93 about 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And right before he died, he called me up. He said, I just remembered something and I think you need to know. I'm like, what? And he said, well, when you were 4 years old, you were taking a crap on the toilet. And I walked by and you said, hey, Dad, come here. And I walked in and you took the toilet paper out and you said, see, this toilet paper works just like movie film works. It's all shot with frames and then it's rolled up and it rolls really fast. And my dad was like blown away. Like, how could this 4-year-old know the inner workings of a motion picture camera? And I didn't ever remember it, but he thought it was so important to tell me that he called me up one day and said, I just remembered this. I forgot it for 60 years or whatever it's been. And I think you need to hear it. And I went, whoa, really? So I don't know.
Wow. Okay. Well, those are experiences of universe talking to you. If only you have the time and the inkling to listen. So that's a fabulous story. Thank you for sharing that. So you and I did these decodes a couple of years ago, and we looked at The Shining at the time. I think it was the episode 3 here on the Decoding Kubrick with Jay Weidner. Now, at the time we recorded that, were you already on the track of the sub layers of this movie, or were you still, like I was pretty much all of my life, thinking that this was a horror film genre? Where did you start making that switch, Jay?
Well, I had found the Department of Information release from 1965 saying that they were looking to recruit 5 top film directors and called Stanley Kubrick the most promising. And so I thought it had the smoking gun for the moon landing, right? But then I started looking further into it, and I realized that the guy who gave him the money for his first 2 films, Fear and Desire and The Killer's Kiss, was deep French intelligence and with CIA ties. And I went, well, that's weird, right? What is this? And then I started realizing that Kubrick had an awful lot of money for a guy that never had a hit film. He had an apartment in the village, and I think he had another place somewhere else. And then he was always constantly going out to LA. And this is a guy who never had a hit film. I mean, he didn't have a hit film till Paths of Glory, and that wasn't much of a hit. Spartacus was really his first big hit. And so then I began looking further, and I realized that he had all these ties to people. And then I thought, well, wouldn't you want to work with Stanley Kubrick if you were in the intelligence world and you have this incredible filmmaker who could create incredible propaganda if you asked him to do it? And I think that he actually did work on the side for them doing various projects, probably up at Lookout Mountain above Laurel Canyon, because he lived in LA on and off from 1940 to 1965. So, I mean, it wasn't like, he was not there. He was there, and he would have surely participated in any scenes that were there. He was living in Pasadena at the same exact time that Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were doing their rituals right there. I'm not saying that he was associated with that, but he was right there in the same city at the same time. And, finally, I realized that, of course, if he did do the moon landings, then he probably had lots of intelligence ties. And I still believe he did the moon landing. So I think that he wanted to tell us. First off, here's the thing you have to understand. Kubrick signed a deal with Warner Brothers in 1969, 1970. And he made A Clockwork Orange, which was a big hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was offered The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty to do the movie for it. And he didn't believe, and all the way to the end of his life, never believed in the supernatural. And so he turned it down. He said, I can't do this book. It was about exorcism and Catholic priests, and I'm an atheist. And, so he turned it down, and William Friedkin took it and turned it into a gigantic hit and biggest hit horror film of all time. And Kubrick opted to do Barry Lyndon, which massively failed.
Big flop. Yeah.
Big flop. And so I believe that he was offered the Shining by Warner Brothers. Kind of like, you either take this, you had a flop film. You could have taken The Exorcist. You said no. Then you had a flop film, and, we want you to have a hit. We already had a gigantic hit by taking an A-list director and a horror novel with The Exorcist, and we want to repeat this and take an A-list director, wrap it up with another hit horror novel, and have another hit, have a 1-2 punch. And Kubrick was in the position where it wasn't really possible for him to say no. I don't think they forced him to do it. But when he read the book, he liked it. I think what he liked about it was not the horror or anything. He liked the fact that he could take this bare bones story, which is really kind of not very, it's kind of a dumb story, and then add layers and layers and layers and layers of other things onto the top of it to create what we have, which is a puzzle piece that people have been pondering since it came out over 40 years ago.
Now, the fact that he really didn't believe in the supernatural, and the fact that maybe he was forced into this, having had a flop with the one before, does that somehow explain also why he was rewriting this as he went along? There's some back story videos of behind the scenes of Jack Nicholson saying, "Hey, I can't read the script. They're changing it every day, so I just concentrate on learning them the morning of," type of thing. So there was a quote to that effect. Tie that in. Why was he doing that?
Well, that's from the Vivian Kubrick's The Making of The Shining, a brilliant documentary about the making of the movie. And our theory is that he handed in, this happens a lot in Hollywood, by the way, he handed in one script that was based on the novel pretty much. And then they said, yeah, here's your money. And then he rewrote the script behind everybody back, including his co-screenwriter, Diane Johnson. And so she's not in those scenes helping him write. That's him furiously writing all by himself on the typewriter with two fingers, And I believe that he was rewriting the script with the intention of getting all of the things that we have in A Clockwork Shining into that movie. And he was basically saying that Jack and Wendy and Danny are in an MK Ultra program over at the.
Let me stop you there. So when we did our original Decode, we looked at the horror aspect of it, the ghosts behind the scenes, so to speak, taunting him to do what he eventually does in the movie. And we also looked at the connotations with the moon landing, specifically room 237, how that number relates to a lot of mathematical equations and all of that stuff. But when I got into watching A Clockwork Shining, I realized, oh shit, there's a lot more. So talk about the Native Americans, the MK Ultra, the swastika, and how that ties into what we're going to talk about here tonight, Jay.
So the great writer and researcher Robert Temple is a good friend of mine. And he told me that Kubrick was obsessed with Nazi memorabilia and Nazi science, and literally obsessed. And of course, his wife was German. His producer, Jan Harlan, was his wife's brother, also German, big German family, the Harlans. And his brother-in-law, her brother-in-law, was Leni Riefenstahl, the greatest documentary filmmaker of all time, her cinematographer. And she made propaganda films for the Germans during World War II. And I believe that with the different layers that are in The Shining are all true. That it is about the Holocaust. It is about the Native Americans being killed. It is about the moon landings. It is about MK Ultra and all the things that Room 237 movie postulated. And so I believe they're all true because they're all interrelated. Holocaust is related to Paperclip, related to NASA, related to MK Ultra, because that came from Germany, from what's his name, Mengelé's experiments, and transferred over to Sidney Gottlieb. And I believe that Kubrick was fascinated, and we use A Clockwork Orange, his movie from 10 years earlier, as an example that Kubrick was fascinated with mind control. He was blown away by it. He probably I mean, I think I know that he considered his films to be a form of mind control. And that's what the continuity errors in The Shining are all about, is he's trying to break you by moving stuff around in the backgrounds and changing stuff on the wall and taking away light switches and then putting them back and all that. He's causing you to question reality itself. He's breaking you. And that's what they do with Alex in the movie theater under the drug that he was on, the Ludovico technique. And I think that he was repeating it with The Shining. I think it was the same themes. And you think about it, Full Metal Jacket's about mind control too. The whole first 45 minutes are taking these nice Midwestern kids and shaving their heads and turning them into murderous killers, right? That's MK Ultra for you.
Right. Yeah.
And so over and over in his movies, he has the same theme. A normal person is taken by the government and turned into a murdering killer. And, there might be different variations of it, but it is a continuous theme in all of Kubrick's work. And I think that's a conscious thing that he's doing.
It's fascinating to see this. So let me bring up a couple of screenshots. You mentioned the swastika. I had not seen this the first time, and once somebody points it to you, he's like, "Oh yeah, I cannot unsee that from the scene." Right? There's also a place later on where his picture is on the screen, and you can see that there's a beginning of a Hitler mustache forming on his picture. There, let me put it up a little bit bigger so you can see that back and forth. So it is in there for sure. Yep. You can definitely see that.
Yep.
So Jay, for today's Decode, let's get into. We've already talked about the moon landing layer of it in our last Decode a couple of years ago, but let's look at the MK Ultra sublayer here tonight. It was fascinating to me. And so this movie starts with, hey man, this is not a physical job being the caretaker of this hotel, it's a psychological one. So right there at the beginning of the movie, they kind of tell you where this is going, and I had completely missed that. I thought maybe it was a psychological thriller and there was ghosts involved and it was break his psyche. But now, as we decode a little bit deeper, it seems that there's much, much, much more at play. First, before we go too far, what did you make of the people from Denver? Again, that kind of slips your mind at the beginning of the screen. It's just something that somebody says in his job interview, that the people in Denver are looking for a specific personality type for this job. Who are the people in Denver, Jay?
Well, we don't know, but it's very mysterious because they keep repeating it. But it's a well-known fact that the CIA's main headquarters is Langley, Virginia, but their secondary headquarters is Denver. And they're actually now by the Denver airport, which, by the way, the airport runways are shaped like a swastika, just saying. And so they've always had a big presence here because this is the center of the country and they can get anywhere on the flights and quickly. And they are moving here now completely. They're moving their headquarters and everything to Denver area. So Denver's always been a center of the military industrial complex, and the airport, of course, is part of that, which wasn't around when The Shining was made. But I think that's what that is. That Denver is a euphemism for the CIA.
Yeah. Okay. Let's also talk about the building itself. This too was fascinating to me. You and I had done an interview. We were looking at Laurel Canyon, but we were looking specifically at Sex and Rockets, the Jack Parsons book, I think it was. And now I get a flashback to this because this, of course, is the Overlook Hotel in the movie. And now we have to go back to this. Is it Overlook or what's the other one? The Lookout Mountain here on Laurel Canyon. So this no longer exists. This is what's been demolished. Or was there a fire here before the airport?
Fire. Just like in the book, the Overlook is burned down. If you remember.
Yeah, exactly. At the end, yeah. We're eventually going to look at what's the one, Dr. Sleep. Did you want to do a decode on that too? Because now that I have watched this documentary, it kind of, I don't know, it got me confused as to what Dr. Sleep was going after. Did you see that movie, first of all?
Yeah, I did. It's an interesting film because it uses Kubrick's film as a sequel to Kubrick's film, which King hated. So I don't know what to make of all that. I actually did like Dr. Sleep a lot better than I thought I would. and you know, it had the same. Clearly, whoever wrote the film and directed the film, Fred, I forget his name, Fred something. He had read my stuff and seen my stuff because he was using a lot of the imagery that I had shown in my previous Kubrick's Odysseys, which doesn't surprise me. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting film. You know, Stephen King. I don't think Stephen King has written a good book since he quit drinking. I hate to say that, and that was a long time ago. So I'm not really impressed with Stephen King, and I sort of share Stanley's feeling about Stephen King that he's not very good at dialogue, but he is good at scene structure. He structures his books like movies. They're cutting back and forth, and that's really cool and everything. But his dialogue is kind of weak. But that doesn't mean anything because I mean he's got a lot more success than I ever had. So, but I did talk to a mutual friend of Stephen King's and and he told me this would have been 10 years ago that Stephen King thought I was right about the moon landing. And I bet you Stephen King thinks I'm right about this. I'm sure he's probably seen the movie already. And I'm sure that he thinks, yeah, that's what it's about. Yeah. And you know, we discovered the ending that Kubrick had cut from the movie. He'd had an ending, not the ending that's now there, but he had another ending. And it got out. Probably 15, 20 reels got out to all the theaters, and Kubrick had his editor go out and cut this ending out, completely out. And so we couldn't find we found photographs of the ending, and we found the script to the ending, but there is no film. Kubrick makes sure it was completely destroyed.
Okay, and don't go too far. We'll keep that for last. That'll be the cherry on top here of our decode. So set the stage for me here too. We're looking at the era of sex, drugs, and rock and rolls. Laurel Canyon, of course, was not the typical place to go have a recording studio, but yet a lot of these big bands, including the Doors, many others were there recording. So tie that into, I'm just going to play some B-roll from the documentary here in the background, but why is that important? Let's set the stage here for this rock and roll era and how a lot of these kids who became superstars were all family members of high-ranking military people. Explain that to the audience. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, it's apparent to, Dave McGowan, who wrote the original Laurel Canyon book, who's also a friend of mine, the late, great Dave McGowan, who died way too young. He thought that the military industrial complex took their troubled kids and sent them to Laurel Canyon. And then he gave them a job because they usually couldn't even hold a job as rock and rollers. And so Jim Morrison, whose dad was in the Gulf of Tonkin incident, came to LA from Florida with a book of all their songs already written. People don't understand that, but they were all in this book, this notebook that he had, and all the lyrics to all their songs were there, except for, I think, Light My Fire, which was written by their guitarist. And he just came like kind of ready-made. He left Florida.
It was all pre-canned.
Yeah, he had left Florida he had short hair, was a straight A student, and then he arrives in LA, he's got hair down to here, and all of a sudden he's you know, Aldous Huxley quoting, you know, drug taking shaman singer, and you just got to wonder if what this is all about. And when you realize that his dad actually started the Vietnam War, then it all becomes kind of apparent that there's something else going on here. David Crosby's dad was big up in the military. Frank Zappa's dad worked at the Fort Detrick in Maryland and as a chemist working on weapons. And Frank Zappa used to go around telling everybody, he said, Laurel Canyon's filled with CIA hippies. He would say that to people, right? He knew what was going on. And it appears that it was this big operation. LA was not a music town. Detroit, San Francisco, New York, they were all big music towns. Memphis, Nashville, they were all big music towns, but LA wasn't it was a movie town. So all of a sudden it turns into a music town, like in 2 or 3 years. And, you know, they had this group called the Wrecking Crew, Glenn Campbell was the lead guitarist. It was 5 guys, 2 guitars, a bass, a drum, and an organ or a piano, and they played all the music for all the bands. All the bands had their music played for them by this 5-group guy, and they would just come in and sing. So the Beach Boys never played any of their own music. They was just, and don't forget the Beach Boys connection to Manson. And Charles Manson is running around Laurel Canyon. He's trying to become a rock star. Neil Young and Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys are going out of their way to help Charlie, get a gig and so is Doris Day's son, I forget his name, but he was also involved in all of this. And so you see this gigantic, collusion going on. And people say, well, why do all those bands, why do they accept the Monkees as being part of their group when the Monkees were clearly a fake band? And I reply, because they were a fake band too. I mean, and so that's all I can say. When you start looking at the pedigree of all these groups, you begin realizing that they probably aren't writing the music. They probably aren't writing the lyrics. They're not playing the music for sure. They might be singing on the albums, but that's about it. And that's why these bands sound so crappy when you go see them live. I mean, I went to see the Beach Boys live. I was like, I couldn't stand it. And I went to see the Rolling Stones one time, and they were terrible. Just terrible. Yeah. I went back and went, what's going on here? And I realized, oh, I get what's going on. They're not playing their own music on the albums. And
I saw the Stones in 2003, I think it was. They came to Canada for a special band too. I'm like, who are these guys? Doesn't sound anything like them. It was a horrible show. Like visually, like it was a huge production, but them themselves on the stage, like it was very disappointing.
Very bad. Yeah. They made a movie about the Stones called Sympathy for the Devil by Jean-Luc Godard, the great French filmmaker. And the whole movie, you just see them kind of plunking around on their guitars and drums and everything. He's not really doing much of anything. And then at the end of the movie, they sing Sympathy for the Devil to already produced music, which, by the way, is also in the movie Get Back by Peter Jackson. If you watch the movie, the Beatles are just plinking around. They're kind of singing songs and rehearsing, but they're not very good. They can't sing very good. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the movie, even though they never show them once recording the music, actually, all they do is show them singing. And that's what they're all about. They're using, listen, in corporations, they don't screw around. All right. I work in the corporate world. It's planned down to the gnat's ass. All right. You're not going to risk a guy who's 20 years old, who's only learned to play guitar 3 years ago, to sit down and do a good recording. You're just not going to do it. You're just not going to do it. You're going to get a good band. You're going to have them record it. Then he can come in and sing it, if that's possible too. So the whole music industry has been fake since the 60s. And
so this whole contribution from Laurel Canyon and potentially here the military, the CIA, was in your view, and it seems apparent watching these documentaries, that it was a big mind control program, and that this music industry bringing us into sex, drugs, and rock and roll, really, when you think about it, it's like we're giving it to the man and blah, blah, blah. But really, it was controlled opposition.
Yeah, and it was MK Ultra, because what is MK Ultra? MK Ultra is you take your victim, you feed them tons of LSD, right? Then you mind control them. They're softened up. Now, I personally believe that the LSD backfired on the establishment, that they thought that it would create kind of mind-controlled zombies, but what it did ultimately was a lot of people got liberated with it. And so I think it ultimately backfired, which what they did that frequently happened with them. But if you look at, like, say, the history of the Beatles, right? History of the Beatles is completely out of the ordinary. It can't be. I mean, supposedly Rubber Soul, they wrote and recorded the entire album in 35 days, was it? 40 days? Wow. They had no songs written, and they showed up and they wrote all the songs for Rubber Soul. And, that's not what happened. What happened is that they showed up with the music already done, and they sang to the music, which was done by that produced George Martin. And he was amazing. George
Right.
Martin was an amazing producer, amazing musician. He could play like 16 different instruments, all virtuoso style. He was brilliant. He saw the Beatles. They came in. They were all scruffy and they were funny. I'll admit that. And he said, because he'd been doing shows, I forget, with Peter Sellers called I forget the name. It was a show in the late 50s on comedy on British TV, and he wanted to repeat that. And if you watch Help and Hard Day's Night, those movies are based just on that show that he had with Peter Sellers in the 50s. Fast moving, sped up photography and everything. And so the Beatles were another production of, and what did the Beatles do? They introduced LSD to the West, right? That's what they did. That is what MK Ultra operation. Let's make a fake band and then let's have them introduce LSD again. It probably backfired, but that is all.
So if this was a mass like mind control program through the music and maybe these bands that we loved and we thought, hey, we're sticking it to the man, we're really controlled opposition. What happened to Bob Marley in all of this? Why is he the outlier? Is he also connected to the military families? There's a reason we're getting into the music here. It ties into the movie, but keep going.
Yeah, Bob Marley's dad was in the military and intelligence world. He was a white Englishman, and he married a Jamaican woman, and they had Bob Marley. And I personally am with Mark Devlin. I don't believe Bob Marley was part of it. I believe that he actually might have been the real deal, just because he died at 35 from cancer of the foot. And that's a really strange story, and the CIA was famous in those days for putting radioactive particles in the front of a shoe and then giving it to people and getting cancer, or sticking it on the seat of your car and getting butt cancer.
What was that book? That guy who detailed like 100 cases of the CIA injecting cancer in people's anuses while they were sleeping or while they were under drug or something like that too. It was all connected to this. Wow, that's crazy. Wow.
They don't really care. And, so what happens is that they get out of control. John Lennon was out of control. He did the Playboy interview, 8 months before he died. And he said the Beatles were not a fraud. The Beatles they weren't real, is what he was saying. The Beatles aren't real. They're not what you think they are. And then, of course, Mark David Chapman, who was reading Catcher in the Rye, which is featured heavily in A Clockwork Shining, shoots and kills Lennon. He sets the gun down on the cement post there, and then he pulls out A Catcher in the Rye and starts reading it. And somebody walks up to him and said, "Do you know what you just did?" He said, "Yeah, I just shot John Lennon." And then what are you doing? He said, "I'm waiting for the police." Right? And then 2 months later, John Hinckley shot Reagan, and he had Catcher in the Rye on him. And both of these assassination attempts came within 1 year of the release of The Shining, which features Shelley Duvall reading A Catcher in the Rye.
I've got it on the screen here for you guys. I thought that was absolutely. I missed that the first time watching it, also, and yet I've known this book from all the conspiracy theory movies. I have my own copy here for the audience members here tonight. I was just like, wow, okay, now we're getting into the MK Ultra stuff. Okay, so guys, we went from the music here, pop industry, back into this movie here, and why perhaps all of this is tying into the MK Ultra phase of it. Now, so there's a couple of aspects in the movie that also are paying tribute to this MK Ultra. So we understand, having seen and listened to some of the survivors of this, that one of the main techniques is to traumatize the individual to the point that they're softened and they're broken, and then through a term called psychic driving, they can introduce now the new programming for this individual. That seems to be happening also in the movie to two, at least, individuals, and perhaps the third one, but at least Jack seems to be going through this episode as well here with the psychic driving in the way he's writing his book, but also the young lad seemingly traumatized in the past. We hear this in the movie that he was traumatized by his father, has broken his arm, and that he is starting to now have these psychic abilities, which is also an offset of this MK Ultra program. So start building the narrative to all of this here. What's Kubrick trying to tell you, and where do you see in this documentary the hints there to the MK Ultra programming techniques, Jay?
Well, Jack is taken. The family is taken up into this hotel that's in the middle of nowhere, up in the Colorado mountains, and they're isolated all by themselves, which is a perfect place if you're trying to do an MK Ultra experiment. And there's various clues. Shelley or Wendy is reading A Catcher in the Rye, which is written by J.D. Salinger, who was worked for OSS, precursor to the CIA, and he was in Germany at the end of World War II, debriefing the Germans. That probably Operation Paperclip, by the way. And he wrote this book, and we show in the book the great Joe Atwill, who's an expert on The Catcher in the Rye. We show that The Catcher in the Rye is a book about mind control, and it's a book about how they control people and how they put on their people killing hat, and how they have Masonic rituals, and how he's sleeping with his 12-year-old sister, and all sorts of stuff that's in the book that people don't even realize is in there. And really, it's very disturbing. So that's the first clue that we're watching something here that may not be what we think it is. And then we find out that Danny is the boy, has been traumatized by his dad, Jack, and broke his arm. And now Danny has psychic powers. And we know from the MK Ultra programs that traumatized children frequently get psychic powers as a result of the trauma they went through. And so we're surmising that is where Danny got his powers, from the abuse that he got at the hands of his dad. And then we go on where they enter into the hotel, and all sorts of weird, improbable stuff is happening, and continuity errors and things. But then we have Jack slowly kind of turning crazy, and then he tells Wendy, don't come in my room while I'm typing anymore, right? And so every day he's writing his book, right? His big book, his bestseller. And then, of course, Wendy breaks into the room one day to see what's going on. And we see that Jack is writing the same sentence over and over, very reminiscent of Sirhan and the RFK assassination, writing over and over, RFK must die, RFK must die. And it's psychic driving. It was done by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the founder of MK Ultra. He's the guy that invented psychic driving. Sometimes he would put a recording on a person's pillow and just have it repeat over and over all night long, all day long, the same sentence over and over. And this scene of Jack writing the same sentence over, it's not in the book. This is strictly an original scene that's in the movie. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense because Jack is actually working on a scrapbook that he found in the basement. It's actually featured in the scene where he's yelling at Wendy. And the screenwriter that worked with Stanley was dismayed. He said, Diane Johnson, she said, I can't believe that Stanley cut the crucial scene where Jack finds the scrapbook. Well, if it's a movie about MK Ultra and not about horror and ghosts and all that, he wrote that just so it would please the studio, because that's part of the book. But no, he didn't. He didn't use it at all. And Kubrick I don't even think the studio ever figured out what he was really doing either, by the way. They may have accepted the moon landing stuff, but I don't think they ever saw the MK Ultra stuff until now. And I think Kubrick intended it to stay hidden all the way up until whenever it finally got exposed. But over and over in the movie, we see these hints that he's pointing back towards the MK Ultra programs. And then we come to understand that he doesn't believe in the supernatural, that all of the people in the movie, the ghosts, Lloyd the bartender, all of them, they're not ghosts, they're real people, they're actors. They're acting. They're coming in and out, and they're acting, trying to freak the family out and see how far they can push him until Jack does what they want him to do, which is kill his family.
So they're live role actors, like a LARPing, basically.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, so are they all LARPing, or are there some of them that are starting to be now the effects of maybe the LSD? Because there's a critical moment where Jack is given the alcohol for the first time, and that starts changing his mindset. So do you think that at that point he's being spiked with LSD, as was the tactics for old CIA operatives? And how does that translate to the rest of the LARPers he sees? Are they all LARPing, or is there starting to see now some hallucinations also? Where do you make the distinction?
That's very amorphous, and Kubrick confuses that on purpose. But Lloyd, the bartender, comes out of nowhere. There's no booze in the hotel. It's all been cleared out. The manager told Jack that. So where did the booze come from? Where did Lloyd come from? How does Jack know Lloyd? And why does Jack not have any money when he first meets Lloyd, but on the second time he's got plenty of money to pay for the drink? And so Lloyd meets him and gives him a drink, and immediately Wendy comes in and says that Jack has to go to room 237 because somebody there assaulted Danny, their son. And the very next scene is Jack entering room 237, and it's clearly the most psychedelic scene in the movie. It's all bright greens and purples, and everything is like so really psychedelic. And I think that Jack is been hit with an LSD trip. And then he goes up into the room and he hallucinates probably the beautiful woman, and it turns out to be the elderly lady. And then when Wendy asks Jack what happened up there, he won't tell her, right? Maybe he doesn't even remember, right? And so I think that that's what's going on there. I think that he's been given a Mickey, slipped a Mickey in the drink, and he doesn't know it. And then Jack goes into his whole craziness at that point. He isn't triggered until Wendy finds the fake book. That's when the triggering has started, whatever, because of the psychic driving, right? Now he's got to do something here. And then he does. He comes after Wendy and tries to kill her. And so the triggering event is the discovery of the book, discovery of the psychic driving, and the fact that that has to be kept secret.
It's absolutely fascinating. Now, there's also a scene where Danny meets the two little girls in the playroom. In the back corner, there's a poster, and it says Monarch on it. So tie in the Monarch now also to the MK Ultra, and we can get into also the victim, a survivor there at the end of the movie, and how she ties that in also. So why is that Monarch part interesting, and why are we looking at those two little girls with the conjunction of that poster in your view?
Well, I believe that Monarch, of course, is the name of the famous MK Ultra mind control program where they use sex, women and sex to get mind control people. And this is the first time that Danny meets the twins in the movie. And I believe that this is Danny is coming under a Monarch control program, or he's already under it. And Kubrick is telling us this. It's important to understand that we did not know about MK Ultra until the Church Committee hearings in 1975, when Frank Church got the CIA to admit that there was an MK Ultra program. And that was the first time we ever knew about it, or what it was, or anything. After that, a slew of books came out by ex-CIA and journalists and stuff talking about all of the MK Ultra programs, and we learned a lot about it. But that was all before Kubrick started shooting The Shining. So it was like 3 or 4 years while he was developing The Shining and before he started shooting it, which is another reason why he's rewriting all the time, because new information, at that time, new information was coming through all the time. Every day there would be another new shocking revelation of what the CIA was doing to us. And then again, he's got Jack Nicholson, who's one of the big, huge people from Laurel Canyon. He wrote and starred in 3 of the top Laurel Canyon films of the 1960s. The top one being, of course, Easy Rider, which was made by other Laurel Canyon occupants, Peter Fonda, and I forget the other guy's name, the crazy guy. And so Jack was part of it. He wrote The Trip which was a film by Roger Corman about taking LSD. So Jack is also now part of this pro LSD push going on at the same time that the Beatles are out pushing it, same time the Stones are out pushing it, and we're getting this confluence of all these forces coming together in 66, 67, telling us all to take LSD, which is exactly what the MK Ultra programs want you to do. And there's a lot of other Laurel Canyon connections to Stanley Kubrick too, which we show in the movie. And so I think that Kubrick was highly aware of all the details of this, and he picked Leon Vitali, his top assistant, and I had a really long conversation in 2013 at a conference, film festival conference. And I asked him, I said, so what did you do on The Shining? He said, well, Stanley had me run around the United States with my 35 millimeter camera taking pictures of hotels. So I went from hotel to hotel to hotel to hotel, and I would just walk around taking pictures all day and then send the pictures back. And then Stanley would send me off to the next hotel. And I got to the Timberline Hotel in Mount Hood in Oregon, and I took the pictures of it, and I sent it off to Stanley, and Stanley called me up when he got the pictures and said, come home, you're done. We found the hotel. That's what I'm looking for. And that just happens to be one of the hotels that has the same Swiss sloping roofs, because to get rid of all the snow and everything. And that is exactly what the Overlook Hotel has. Also has the curved sloping roofs. It's got the tower. It's got the Swiss kind of look to it. And I actually talked to Dave McGowan, the author of the Laurel Canyon book, Weird Scenes in Laurel Canyon. And I said, do you ever notice that Lookout Mountain Hotel looks a lot like the Lookout Mountain looks a lot like the Overlook? He said, yeah, I have actually noticed that. Right. So he noticed it too. And that was the only connection I had at the time until I started realizing, of course, that Monarch was in the movie. Catcher in the Rye was in the movie. Possible LSD experiments were in the movie. And then I realized, of course, this is Kubrick, what he was doing. He didn't want to make a horror movie. Nothing, not with supernatural horror movie. He might want to make a thrilling horror movie. But The Shining isn't even scary. Not really. And Jack only kills the Halloran. He only kills one person in the movie. And if you think about it, he kills nobody in the book. He doesn't commit any murders. So you have to wonder, why were people afraid of? Why was this causing people to be afraid? I don't really understand. It's really not. And even Stephen King proved it himself when he remade The Shining in the mid '90s, and it wasn't very good. It was bad, yeah. It was bad. Edges aren't scary, Steve.
Speaking of that house or that building, both the Overlook and this one, I wonder, did you see the movie Babylon with Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie? There's a scene where they go to this house at the top of the mountain, and this is basically the king of LA. I don't know if this place is referring to that before it burned too. We'd have to go.
I think it is actually, yeah.
You think?
I think they went to Lookout Mountain. I do.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a nod to Lookout Mountain. Wow.
I think it is, yeah.
Hey, okay, let me show you this one. So this is in Canada. In 1950 to 60, Montreal hospital subjected psychiatric patients to electroshock therapy, drug-induced sleep, and huge doses of LSD. So this was our MK Ultra, and it was being held at this particular facility.
Yeah, Leonard Cohen went through that. There's a famous picture of Leonard Cohen all bound up with a mask on him, and they're clearly feeding him drugs and everything. And I talked to a former girlfriend of his who said that he was really upset about that whole incident, and he said she ruined his whole life. And then look, he's a rock star. It's like, what? It's like, what the heck, right?
That's what Ryder said in one of your interviews. I did a lot of research for this, and he says, "Oh, it just struck me. I've always known this, but now I really do. why a lot of people are superstars. It has nothing to do with their talent. It has to do with all this connection in the background and who's running the mass psychological operations. I thought, wow, like that brought it home for me. Just to finish on the MK Ultra stuff in Canada, we had a lawsuit here just recently in Ottawa. The federal government here is trying to quash this lawsuit that is pertaining to some of these patients here that suffered damages during those years there in between the 1940s and 60s at that very institute in Montreal. And when you look at that too, like we can make a whole lot of show about these Tartarian buildings here in Canada. It would be interesting for you and I to get maybe John Levy to look at this particular building and see what we can find out there. So let's talk about the LSD part just a little bit here too. So in the movie, we're presuming that his drink was spiked. And in room 237, perhaps there was an aerosol type of mist also there, both inducing Danny and Jack. So in your documentary, you interview Walter Bosley, and he talks about these experiments openly. Share that with the audience members and set the stage here, because it's possible that not only was Kubrick warning us of things that were done in the past, maybe things that were done in the 70s, but perhaps things that could be done to us now on an even more mass psychological scale. You have this segment in the movie about all of the mainstream news repeating the exact same words now during the COVID situation. So again, that psychic driving is still very much in effect, or at least they're still trying to use those same old tactics. So talk about Walter Bosley, what he brought to the table here in terms of the LSD and some of these experiments on the unsuspecting public, Jay.
Well, we wanted Walter in the movie because he was in the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, which is essentially like the Men in Black. And he knew a lot about the Air Force mind control programs. Lookout Mountain was run by the Air Force. So it was, and also Kubrick has deep connections to the Air Force, in which they flew to England during the making of Dr. Strangelove because they wanted to see the B-52 cockpit that he had. And when they went to look at it, they said, "Oh my God, this is as close as you can get. How did you get these top secrets?" And Kubrick had to show them, pictures from Aviation Weekly, which is where he got all of his stuff. And so he was, he just brilliantly put it all together. So the Air Force has this big part of this whole thing. Kubrick got involved with the Air Force probably, and during Dr. Strangelove, they denied him the right to shoot a B-52, so he created his own model flying over Siberia. They thought that was actually real. They couldn't understand how he got those shots, and so we wanted Walter Bosley because he gave us all this credibility for the Air Force's role in the MK Ultra programs, and what Walter definitely delivered. And super happy he said yes to be in the movie. And so now we know that the Air Force is a big, huge part of the MK Ultra programs, and is probably the only military force that's actually still doing the MK Ultra stuff to this day. It looks like the other ones have kind of quit, but we don't know about the Air Force. And I think this is really the first time that it's been exposed that the Air Force even was involved in the MK Ultra programs outside of the Laurel Canyon book by Dave McGowan.
That's fascinating stuff. And again, why were those guys in Las Vegas filming movies? And there was a clip in there. I don't know the time frames, but maybe you can adjust this for the audience to where at Lookout Mountain they had at that point, or for a period of time, filmed actually more movies than in Hollywood. Like, what was that quote there? Explain that to the audience.
Yeah, they filmed more movies at Lookout Mountain Studio than all Hollywood studios combined during the time it was there. Literally tens of thousands of films. I believe that probably the Zapruder film was taken there to be altered. I believe that the test, A-bomb test, where they show the homes being blasted over and everything, that was all done there. It was all done with propaganda, and we were all propagandized. And this is the beginning of it. This is where they learned it. So basically, after World War II, the 50s were MK Ultra doing small operations to figure out how everything works through Lookout Mountain, And then the 60s were the beginning of activating MK Ultra on a wider scale. So they created the music industry, they created the Laurel Canyon film business, Easy Rider, glorifying LSD and all that. And then in the more like the late 70s, but definitely the 80s and 90s, that's when they took it worldwide and everything became MK Ultra. And that's where we stand today. Completely mind controlled. We don't even know what our thoughts are. They're using advanced.
What was that guy? What was that guy? I played a clip of him when we launched the War Correspondent show. Menmez Bezmedev, or one of those Russian. Yeah, so he was talking about not entrainment, but psychological subversion and the 4 steps of that. And I thought, oh my God.
He's in the movie, and he talks all about how you first, you make them hate themselves, and then you get them to change the way they think, and we're in that stage right now. The whole woke movement is us getting us to hate ourselves. That's what that is. We're no good. We're not woke enough. We got to get more woke. And it's basically, you're a terrible person. You're bad, and that's how it works. There he is, Yuri Bezmenov.
Bezmenov, that's it. Yeah, I thought it was fascinating. Now let's look at the bookends, the beginning and the end of the movie. I said, okay, we'll keep this for last. So, in your view, why is the plot actually all set up perhaps in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then tie that in now to the missing conclusion and what some are saying isn't that missing conclusion, and how, if that were still available today, we would know definitely that this movie has something to do with MK Ultra. Jay.
Yeah, so this is the strangest opening to a movie ever. I mean, to sit down, and it's just a conversation between the hotel manager and Jack and the mysterious guy that doesn't say anything. And basically, they lay out the whole plot of the movie in the first 5 minutes. And I remember watching it the first time going, what is going on here? Why would anyone start a movie like this? Right? I could not understand it. I could not. And now I realize this is part of the programming. You tell your victim what you're going to do to them before you do it. Part of the whole thing. I don't know why, but that's what they have to do. So he's basically telling Jack that it's a psychological thing that you're going to be going through, and that somebody else went through it before and he killed his family. But the people in Denver think you're a great guy, so we're going to hire you. And then the end of the movie that is now missing, but we have the script and the photos, and we found an AI regenerated of it, which we couldn't believe we found. And basically what happens is that Wendy is in the hospital, no doubt recovering from all the trauma she was in. And Danny is there. I don't know what he's doing, visiting her or something. And the hotel manager, Ullman, walks in the room and says hi to Wendy and says, we sent people up to the hotel and we didn't find anything that you're saying. There's no evidence for anything that you're saying. But we understand, that you went through a lot of trauma. Maybe you may have hallucinated it or something. And why don't you and Danny come to my home in Los Angeles and stay with me on the beach for the next couple of months? And Wendy's like thinking about it, I guess. And then Ullman walks over to Danny, hands him the green tennis ball that rolled down the aisle near room 237, and says, here's your ball back, right? Oh, wait a minute here. Ullman wasn't in the hotel when the ball got rolled down.
Or was he?
What the heck? And why does he want to have Wendy and Danny go to his house? What in the world? I mean, maybe you'd rent a hotel room for him, but why does he want him in his house? And the answer is he's the guy running the experiment, and he wants to watch Wendy and Danny for a couple of months to see what effect the experiment had on them. That's what they do. They do aftermath viewing of the victims of these experiments. And they were probably very interested in Wendy because she beat them. She stopped them. She's really the hero of the movie. People don't give her enough credit, but I mean, she's the hero. She's the one that beat the MK Ultra operation, stopped Jack, and escaped with Danny successfully. And so he probably wanted to watch and see what they did wrong. And so Kubrick realized that everyone would understand that this was all an experiment, that was impossible for Ullman to know anything about the tennis ball. How would he even know it? The answer is, of course, he's in the hotel watching everything, and gave too much away. So he told his editor to go cut out all those endings and just leave it with, the pan into Jack on the wall, right?
Wow, fascinating. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the reviews. You have rave reviews there on Amazon, and again, we'll show the links for people who want to go and watch your documentary. We've left some things out, of course, for you guys to go enjoy. There's a lot in there, guys, still, but I want a lot in there. But I want to play this segment, so I'm going to change slide decks for you guys here and play some audio for you guys from the clip. So this is the MK Ultra survivor talking about some of these techniques, and I want to bring that to today and have a conversation about what happened with COVID and what could be just around the corner. So this is about a 2 or 3 minute clip. I'm going to play that for the audience members, Jay, and then we're going to come back here for conversation. Hold on.
Neuron pathways in the brain while they're wanting to shut them down. Other components are sleep, food, and water deprivation, and repetitive subconscious manipulation, because repetition is the most basic form of mind control. It's why the controlled media's repetitive narrative is the same all around the world. They use the same phraseology to manipulate the minds of the population.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
Without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Sound familiar? We've heard a lot of that, of course, the fake news media and them being the real news, right? We've had this battle with alternative media in the last couple of years. All of this through this other mass psychological operation, which was the stuff surrounding the last 4 years. We're still on YouTube, I recognize. So going back to maybe a month ago, just before the campaign, there's this famous video of Hillary Clinton coming out saying, we need more censorship here because we're losing control. And at that point, I was watching a Substack from Claude, who suggested that was a critical or a temporal marker here, shifting from the old MK Ultra techniques of managing this farm here on the planet to perhaps going kinetic. And we're seeing that with the weather manipulation and perhaps now also kinetic with the threats of World War III, as we've been seeing here in the last couple of days this week. Now, is it still possible that some of these MK Ultra techniques that were used during the last 4 years were really just a test for something that's also coming up into the field? And I want to specifically now talk about the idea of aerosolized LSD. Cliff in his Web Out Data last month was picking up a big mass poisoning event. And when he was looking at the descriptors, it very much looked like people were going on a psychedelic trip. Now, whether or not those are from natural causes or being produced by some other nefarious characters, that in conjunction with clearly the capability of mainstream news here to mass or to psychically drive humanity, we could be in store here for another mass psychological operation. What is your view on that, Jay? Where are we on that timeline? And is that something that perhaps Jay Weidner, Kubrick was actually trying to warn us about? Was not the past, but what was coming up in the future. What are your thoughts, Jay?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think he was very worried about it because he had kids and he could see where this was going. And I think he was very worried about it, which is one of the reasons why he made The Shining. And I think that what I think is going on is, first off, the galactic emanations are getting stronger and stronger every day, and that's changing us. And I think that a lot of people are beginning to see through the old MK Ultra programs, and which I'm glad my film came out the day before the election, because I think that that it's part of this revelation that we're having. And I think the system's breaking down. I don't think it's working anymore. And I think they know it. And they're running scared, and they have to keep upping the ante to cover up the fact that we're figuring everything out. And right now on X, there's this incredible psychological operation going on that happened after Trump won, which I don't know if they're bots. I suspect they are. A lot of bots are coming out and just being fanatical, completely fanatical, so over the top that it's actually a little bit scary. And we know that MSNBC and CNN and all these leftist podcasters have lost 50, 60% of their views in the last 2 weeks. That doesn't tell me that people left at all. That tells me they were all bots. That it was all bots probably being run by the CIA. That they didn't have these gigantic audiences. It was meant to overwhelm us, made to make us feel small when we make a comment and we get 50 super negative comments that are all insulting, right? And you think, oh my God, I'm the only person here. That's the point. The point is to make you feel isolated, just like they were in the Overlook Hotel. And so the alternative media is falling apart. And that is because we are waking up. And the fakeness of this thing can't be maintained. As soon as Kamala couldn't pay the bot makers to keep going, they stopped making bots. The whole thing fell apart. And that's what happened. And I don't believe that it's people leaving at all. I don't believe that at all. I believe it's all bots. I believe that the dead internet has a lot of realness behind it. I don't think it's completely dead. I think it's about half dead, just half bots and then half real people. And then you look, and Fox News had their best week ever, right? Ever in the history of the entire network last week. I'm not no big Fox News fan. I'm just pointing out what they didn't lose anything. In other words, their bots didn't leave, or they didn't have any bots, right? So the bots seems to be favoring one side over another, and the bots are run by the same people that run the MK Ultra programs. And they're designed to make us think that we're not as big as we think we are. And right now it's really active on X, and I don't know if Elon can do anything about it or not. I don't even know how you would find out where all this is coming from. So the other factor, of course, is fatigue, and that's going to happen here soon. The outrage fatigue is going to start happening, and then you're going to see voices die away. And the other thing is that those guys
you mean all the ladies that are shaving their head and promising not to have sex with men for the next couple of years? Those guys.
It's okay, ladies.
It's okay.
We're interested.
We're good. It's okay. We're good.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. No one's coming after you.
No.
So, yeah, I think the whole thing, the whole MK Ultra edifice is crashing and burning right now. Normies are converting as fast as possible. And I think pretty soon, I think it's actually we're already in the majority now. And I think that, listen, those guys don't have any voice. I mean, if MSNBC gets sold and then you have CNN, which is probably going to convert and go right so you can keep their voters, then where are they going? They don't have X. There's no replacement for X for them. So let them scream and yell, because it's just all going to fade out anyway. And I don't even think we should engage in them, because if they are victims of MK Ultra, you're just going to exacerbate their own victimhood. So it's better to just let them scream and rave and rant, and then eventually they'll get fatigued and go away.
You know, a couple of years ago, people were talking about Elon Musk buying Twitter, and he responded on Twitter saying, "Oh, well, how much is it? Or how much are they asking? Or what's to that effect?" Well, he just asked the exact same phrase, or responded to the exact same phrase about MSNBC here just a day ago. So can you imagine are we seeing MSNBC now playing some of the highlights of all of the clips on X, which of course did a huge damage to the censorship machine during the campaign. I did this video just after the election. See if I can bring this up. I think it was this one, Trump fear porn. And I was doing exactly what the Washington Post was asking us to do, was to compare Trump to Hitler. And as you know, they did this 5,000 article blitz screen of Trump being Hitler. They talked about the Madison Square Garden event, all of these things. And then when you put it into context, you realize that, you know, the Americans didn't buy it. He won a majority. He won the House, he won the Senate, and he also won the popular vote. So as you're saying here, that mechanism of MK Ultra is breaking down. At least enough for them to be screaming about saying, hey, we need more censorship or otherwise we're losing control. So I'm seeing what you're seeing here too. After the election, more people are watching these shows, less and less people are watching the mainstream news. So there is a huge awakening. But that brings me to, okay, what might they do next to regain control? Whether that's the fake alien blue beam type of invasion or this mass poisoning in conjunction perhaps with this psychic priming technique that they still maybe can be able to do on mainstream news. Do you think that's still a fear for humanity? If you look at the last 4 years, you and I did a couple of shows and we were astounded at the number of people on the planet who fell for that psyop, right? We were just like, we couldn't believe. For us, it was so easy to see, we were screaming it on the rooftops, but we couldn't believe and fathom how many people actually took it hook, line, and sinker. Are we still there where they have the capability of that? Or are people now more awake to those tactics? And could that still be used against us? What do you think?
Well, like I said, I think the last time I was on, there was 2 movies going. And it used to be that everybody was watching their movie and hardly anyone was watching our movie. And now more people are watching our movie and their movie is starting to not get as much business. But there's still enough people watching that movie, as evidenced by going on Twitter these days, that the mind control is still hanging on pretty strong. And that's one of the reasons I made a Clockwork Shining. I wanted to break the hypnotic thing that was going on and show everyone. And what happened was, by the way, I showed about 10 people the movie that here locally in my little small town, and they were all fairly well-versed, well-read, not normies. And they all watched it. They all came to me afterwards. I didn't watch it with them. I never watched my movies with other people. And they all came to me afterwards. Oh, well, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. So I made follow-up phone calls to them. And they were all actually telling me that they had been somewhat traumatized by the movie and that it had shocked them into thinking about that maybe, they were victims of this program.
Bingo.
Like, you are.
Right.
And I think they told me that it helped them, that they felt better because after going through the trauma of realizing that they may be a victim of all this too, then they said they started feeling better. And then when they watched the news, they just could see that it was just all this big manipulation. And I said, well, that's exactly why we made the movie, because we wanted you to know that. Wanted you to see how manipulative the whole thing is, from the music industry to the movie industry to television to news and all of it. And then we become wiser and we can pull ourselves out of this incredible trap we're in.
Well, that's a good point. In the movie, Kathy O'Brien, MK Ultra survivor, talks about some of the first steps to deprogramming that MK Ultra, right? So first, understanding that you were programmed, and then walking back your steps. And there's a famous scene in the movie where Danny's doing exactly that here. So share that with the audience members here and put that in context to us realizing today that we've all been MK altered to some extent here, and that we have the capability, if we come together here, to retrace those steps and regain control here of our psyche, as Kathy O'Brien was explaining in the documentary. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, so Danny is being chased by his dad through the maze during a snowstorm, and then he pulls this old Native American trick off, which is you backstep through your footsteps until you get to a place where you can escape. And that's what Danny does. And then he leaves Jack in the cold because Jack can't find Danny anymore. And that's exactly what they tell you to, if you want to find a way to cure yourself from these MK Ultra programs, is to go backwards. And every step that they took you through to unwind it. That's what Leonard Cohen told his girlfriend he had to do, that he had like 10 years it took him to unwind everything that had happened to him. And there's another thing in The Shining and A Clockwork Orange, which you pointed out today in a text message to me. But in The Clockwork Orange, Alex, the head of the guy who's the mind control victim, he has 2 last names in the movie. He's Alex DeLong and Alex Burgess, separate times in the movie, you get to find out that he has two names. And Grady, the previous caretaker at The Shining, he also has two last names. And what this is the split personality. That's why that Wendy meets that guy with the split head in the movie. There's a symbolic of splitting the head and splitting the personality into separate personalities. So one can go off and commit a murder or get reconnaissance, and the other guy doesn't know that it ever even happened, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's going on here. And it is amazing that Kubrick was that advanced, even in 1970, to know all about this. So it kind of tells me that he must have known the MK Ultra programs a lot earlier than 1975.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he wasn't
just read in as he did the movie. He had been read in quite some time before.
Yeah, and I think the church committee in 75 gave him permission to now talk about it because it's now out in the open. So he had all this knowledge that he'd already had, and then he used that to make the movie and slip it all in so that, you know, the audience wouldn't know what was really going on. But on a subliminal level, they would, and it would scare them, but they wouldn't know why they were scared. And
Right.
MK Ultra programs, that's what they do. They scare you, but you don't know why you're scared.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, it's so fascinating. All right, we're already past the hour mark. Let's talk about these amazing reviews. 85% of people watched it here, gave you a 5-star. I read most of these here on the first 4 pages in preparation for this show. I agree with many of the comments there. You mentioned your focus group also, but what am I missing? For the people who are listening to this documentary, Decode, here tonight, why did you make this movie? And what if you had success, not in terms of a filmmaker, in terms of money and distribution, but if you had a success definition here for this endeavor, what would that be? And did you reach that goal, Jay?
Well, I haven't yet because my goal is to in this project is to bring a lot more normies over to our side. And that was the whole point of the thing. That's the whole point of my next project. And so I made it for that reason. I wanted to take a pop culture iconic thing like The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, something that everybody had seen, but they didn't really know what it was, and then attach a whole bunch of things that they don't know about to the movie to make it make sense. And so the movie is like a Trojan horse. You're going in thinking it's one thing, and you're coming out going, oh my God, this movie is a whole thing that I didn't even realize.
It's the old switcheroo. Yeah.
And yet it makes total incomplete sense. And I'm actually kind of interested to hear what Vivian Kubrick, his daughter, has to say about this, because she became a Scientologist, which is kind of
I was going to ask you, did she reach out to you since this is out or no?
No, she doesn't like me. She hates my moon landing stuff. I don't know what she's going to think about this. And I got to be honest with you, Vivian, there was a lot of stuff we could have said that we didn't. And because of our deep, abiding respect for your father as a great filmmaker, we left a lot of stuff out because we didn't want to hurt his reputation. But when Kubrick died, his chauffeur wrote a book. I believe he's a Spanish guy. He wrote a book about his adventures with Stanley, right? Over the years. And he said in the book that he came back from Stanley's funeral and he went in to go into Stanley's study. And he saw a whole bunch of cars out in front. And he'd go like, what's going on here? And he goes into Stanley's study and there's like 15 guys rifling through Stanley's, all of his work. They're taking books, files, photographs, slides, video, everything. And they're piling it into a truck. And he says only he and Stanley had keys to this office. Nobody else had a key. So he couldn't understand how they got in. But I know personally from my contacts with the CIA that they told me they can get into any locked door, anything, anywhere. You'll never know unless they want you to know.
Similar thing happened to Tesla when he died. The Office of Foreign Property took off all of his belongings, the books, the sketches, the diagrams, everything.
Led by John Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah,
John Trump, exactly. Trump alluded to that in that interview with Joe Rogan, by the way.
Yes,
So
he
that's
did.
interesting to see if he's kind of seeding here for perhaps disclosure of some of those older technologies here that have been hidden from us. Wow, crazy
No,
times.
I think we're going to have free energy within a year. I
Wow,
think
that's going to be
I don't
fascinating.
think there's any stopping what's about to happen.
Okay, so guys, if you want to help me helping Jay reach his objective here of bringing more normies to our side here and contributing to this mass awakening, of course, you can go to beyondmystic.net/Kubrick. There you'll see the links to both of the documentaries available now. And Jay, you were saying also people were asking about Canada earlier into the show. Will this be available on Vimeo also, perhaps for Canadians soon?
Yeah, it'll be about a week or so. I'm putting it up on Vimeo, and you'll be able to see it. You can see it on Apple TV, I believe.
Yeah.
And yeah, I want to get our friends in Canada to see it because of the big, huge, MK Ultra operation that went on there at Dr. Cameron and McGill University and the whole thing. And it's really important that Canadians understand they were a big part of the whole MK Ultra operation. They don't even know it. And, and then a lot of the Laurel Canyon singers were Canadian. What's her name? Joni Mitchell, Neil Young. Whole strange stuff.
So guys, check it out, beyondmystic.net/Kubrick. You'll see all the show notes and the links for tonight's episode, including the links to purchase or rent the documentary from Jay. You can find that, of course, also here on prime.com if you're on the American side of the audience members. Jay, something else too. You mentioned that this is leading into your next documentary, and this is going to be maybe a 1-2 punch here in that same objective of yours. Can you give us hints as to what that next documentary might be?
Well, it's going to be, hopefully, it will be the pilot to a series. I'd like to do 4 or 5 seasons of alchemy, the plasma universe, and really show the normies a scientific explanation for the paranormal. Which is what this is going to be. It's going to have Robert Temple in it, Andrew Collins, a lot of big names. A lot of people have already agreed to be in it. And what I want to do, of course, is get somebody like Netflix or Amazon to fund the thing so that I can do like Ancient Aliens week after week, cranking it out so that everybody can't really deny it after a certain point. It's going to be amazing. We've already shot the pilot and almost done with that, and then we'll be putting that together, and it's going to be an astonishing show.
Is that a collaboration also with Ryder Lee? Same as the last
Ryder will be doing the editing. I'm working with a woman named Helena Resner, who is an amazing young woman who's just got super high IQ. She's gorgeous, and she's really into this stuff. And we just spent the whole week shooting out in Sedona, and she's amazing, super professional for a young woman, and a real pleasure to work with, really, actually.
Wow. Okay. Well, when you're ready, let us know. We'll be happy to do a review and a decode for you, Jay, anytime. Absolutely. In the meantime, also, I sent you a poster earlier today. We have to reprise our movie Decode series here on Rumble. And I was asking you about The Substance. There's a couple of ways we can go at this because Trump, of course, is promising to release the Epstein list as well as perhaps the Diddy files. And so the whole conversation is about to explode here in terms of adrenochrome, the child sex trafficking networks, and all that. We had the movie last year that came out, The Sign of Silence, which was milk toasty for most of our audience members, but still setting the stage for the mass populace here to get into the topic matter. Now, The Substance, gets into directly here adrenochrome. What did you make of this movie? Do you want to do a decode with me on this, or do you rather maybe do something else?
I'm 90%. I want to watch it again one more time because honestly, the first time I watched it, I was flipped out. I was completely flipped out. And I remember
it's creepy as fuck, man.
My wife said, I'm not watching this. She's like 2 minutes into it. I'm not watching this one. I was like, I don't believe you. And I watched it. I was fascinated with it. It was like watching a car wreck, though. And I have to watch it again because I was so flipped out by the subject matter. I couldn't believe that anybody had the frankly, the balls to actually tackle such a subject.
To pull this off, yeah.
And then the way that they did it, it was so, wow, it's like right in your face. And so
Okay.
I want to watch it from a more metaphysical point of view, because I think I know where you're going.
Okay. So, guys, stay tuned for that. That was just a placeholder date here. Perhaps we'll record there. Perhaps we can do also Dr. Sleep, again, touching on those themes of adrenochrome. There you see the vampires there that are hunting these kids for their shining energy. Basically, we're kind of alluding to the same thing. So maybe we could do those in tandem and kind of tie that in to the work of Kubrick and what he was trying to tell us also in Eyes Wide Shut. Jay, before we go, I want to invite the audience members also to come and join you and your work here on the Reality Check on YouTube. Any new interviews coming up here? I see also that you reposted the Dark Alliance trailer. Do you want to quickly talk about that for the audience members who haven't seen that yet? What's going on there?
Yeah, my good friend Darcy Weir, a Canadian filmmaker, did a film about Corey Goode and David Wilcock called Dark Alliance, and I'm in it. And Leon Kennedy's in it, and Jordan Sather's in it. And it's really pretty good. And it kind of shows you the dark underbelly of the UFO movement and how we get manipulated by our own MK Ultra programs. He doesn't mention MK Ultra, but I put that in. But so, you know, it's a really good movie, and everyone should go see it because it kind of puts a period at the end of the Corey Goode, David Wilcock sentence. And I think their careers are over. Thank you, Darcy.
Well, at the same time, we're getting more and more disclosure, what appears to be leading up to real disclosure. So at some point, some of this fakery has to go. It's going to make way to the real stuff. And if you look at the WebBot data also coming up in the next month or two, we're seeing more and more contact individually. Again, real stuff is going to come out here. So we won't need so much of the fantasy world filling in the gaps, so to speak. So I think that's very encouraging moving forward. If I can make this work, also, I talked to Cliff and Jordan Sather the other day. We're trying to put this show together for you guys here too. So don't, there's no date yet. I'm trying to organize this. They both said yes, but it's a matter of finding the schedule and the time to do it. But yes, we're going to be fighting blue chickens with you guys here very soon. So stay tuned for that poster on our social media page. Jay, last words of wisdom before we go here tonight. Anything else giving into this crazy, wacky world of ours? We seem to have a positive uptick here since the last election. Feels like we just came back an inch away here from the precipice of how do I call it? The abyss, maybe. But still, there's a cautious optimism here. There's a lot of hurdles to be fought. And as a few people have been saying since the election, the fight has only just really begun now. The work really needs to begin right now. So your words of wisdom on how to navigate all of this moving forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's probably the most optimistic I've been in probably my whole life. And it looks like they're really going to go in and tackle the spending problem and all the other problems that they're doing. And the United States could gain back its primacy again, I hope. And we certainly have the brain power with the new administration to pull it off. I don't see the opposition doing anything. They would have already. They covered all the doors and windows in D.C. and New York, expecting those are left-wing cities, expecting riots, probably by left-wingers, because they already knew that Trump was going to win, probably. That's why the president of Google called up Trump 2 weeks before the election. Who would know more than the president of Google, right? And no riots happened. So that tells me that things have taken a turn for the better. And I think there's nothing that they can do now. I think the galactic emanations have become so strong that we're just emboldened. And we're not it's not really a political movement. It's more like a movement of social responsibility. Paying for our bills, not leaving things for our children. And I'm feeling really, really optimistic right now.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Jay. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the amazing documentary. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here tonight. Please leave us a comment after the show. Let us know your takeaway if you've already watched the Clockwork Shining documentary. If you have not, look in the description box right below the video here. I did put the links also to the Prime Video location to rent, as well as the Apple TV link to rent the documentary. So, guys, again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again on Monday for the next edition of the Beyond the News. I'm Jean-Claude Beyond Mystic. I love you guys. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.